So, heads up for the beginning, there will be a trigger warning in place for this video, as I will be talking about mild self-harm and suicidal ideation. And depending on how things go, there may be a language warning in there as well, depending on how emotional I end up getting. Depending on how long this takes, if this goes long, then this may be a part 1 of 2. We'll just see how it works out. If it is a part 1 of 2, then I'm gonna have the part 2 released later in the week. I've already got something of a schedule for my next few topics, and I kind of want to keep to that. Plus, I want to get this over with as quickly as possible. But anyways, today we're going to be talking about exorcisms, or at least the Pentecostal flavored exorcisms. And I'm going to be telling my story. At least the bits of my story that pertain to the topic at hand. Because I've been through quite a few. And yeah. See, let's just start this. I grew up, as I mentioned before, I grew up in a strict evangelical household. We went to a Foursquare Church, which is very much Pentecostal light. We didn't do any of the snake handling or the drinking of the poison drinking, but there was speaking in tongues. There was faith healing to a minor degree. Like if you were sick, you'd go up to get prayed over. And if you had mental health issues, a little foreshadowing, you would try and get those taken care of via quote-unquote exorcism or faith healing. Or I'm just going to use the word exorcism. I know it's the Pentecostal approach isn't exactly what the Catholics do, though I'm not too well versed in what what actually goes into a Catholic exorcism, but it's quote unquote driving out demons. If it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's close enough. It's close enough to a duck. I mean, I might be calling a goose a duck in this analogy, but it's still waterfowl. I don't really have another term that I can call it, so I'm just going to call it exorcisms. Now, anyways, along, from second grade onward, I went to a Christian school. We used the ACE, or Accelerated Christian Education Program, at the church school. I may make a video about that later on, possibly. And it could be that that's where some of the issues that plagued me later on in life kind of took their root. it could be the bullying that I went through in first grade. I don't know, but got bullied pretty badly in first grade, so we got put in a church school. When I went into second, and so, and around right before I turned 13, my maternal grandma, who I was rather close to, passed away. And even kind of before I'd been dealing with some self-esteem issues. I was the tall, gawky, awkward kid. I was the quiet kid. Odds are I'm somewhere on the spectrum, never been actually diagnosed. But so, but the reason why I say that the Christian schooling may have had a hand in the mental issues that would develop is because it was very much, put on, you had little workbooks that you'd fill out, and that was how you learned. And I didn't do very well buckling down and getting them filled out. I'd ace pretty much every test I took because I have a mind like a steel trap. But when it came to sitting down and getting the work done, I read through the workbooks, but so, but anyways, because of that, the work kept piling up. I had to sit through recesses because, I didn't accomplish the goals I set earlier. And, I always saw it as a problem I had with diligence. I wasn't being diligent enough. I prayed for help with diligence, and I worked, I'd work on it and nothing. And the stress and I really it put me into a point where I very much place my self-worth, and still do very much place my self-worth in how I can get tasks accomplished. And anyways, so I 13, grandma dies, grieving added on to that, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I eventually hit the point where I am loathing myself. I am like, and where we get into the mild self-harm. I never cut, but I did strike myself. I would punch my face and, like, pinch my fingers. Never anything that really would leave a mark, except possibly bruising. And I began to think about how everyone would be better off without me, because I couldn't do anything worthwhile. I felt completely and utterly worthless. And as I was, sinking into this funk, I get the, God doesn't make trash. And the, how can you love others if you don't, love your neighbor as yourself if you don't love yourself? And I'm like, and those didn't help, because the God doesn't make trash just makes you, or made me rather, feel worse, because I felt like I was sinning. I was, blaspheming God because I was disrespecting his creation, etc. And the loving your neighbor as yourself if you don't love yourself, well, I'm like, I'm loving them more than myself. Isn't that just as good? So those arguments didn't help me. And eventually it got to the point where I went for counseling with one of the pastors in our church school. And that's where we got into the spirits of the spirit of self-hatred there. And I'm not exactly sure what exactly kind of Christian counseling it was. It was very much based within the church. The youth pastor was the one who actually ran it, or who actually was counseling me. But Shannon Q has a pretty good series going on about Christian counseling. I'm not 100% sure it was the same kind of deal, but it's close enough for horseshoes and hand grenades. So if you want to get more information, check out that series. It's close enough. And so, we go, I go up, and he leads me through, addressing the spirit to drive it out of me. Basically, think Gandalf. For anyone who's watched the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, specifically the Bridge of Khazad-dûm scene, it's pretty much that. And I'm sorry for the seismic activity around Oxford right now. But anyways, they had you claim your authority as a disciple of Christ, and through the power of the Holy Spirit on, Christ's authority, address the spirit and demand that it, leave you. And every couple weeks or so, I'd go and get exercised, and it seemed to get better. It seemed to get better. I mean, and in fact, I very much was, when I was still in, I very much touted my story as a success story. I used it as part of my testimony, which is part of the reason why I'm making these videos, because it's looking like I'm going to have to make a part 2. We're probably going to call this the main part, and then kind of do an epilogue. But, and so I figure if my, perhaps my story can, help. But, well, next time, so later on this week, we'll get on with the actual meat of the story and the aftermath. And, thank you for watching. Hit that subscribe, all the YouTube things, and have a good day.